Good morning, everyone, and what a pleasant surprise this was this morning to wake up to this beautiful view here of Funchal, which is on the Portuguese island of Madeira, and it has a very unique landscape, and in a way it kind of reminds me a little bit of Southern California, just how you have the coast and the mountains so close together. Though here it does look like it's a lot greener than at least most of California is. And anyhow, I'm just getting ready for the day to go do some exploring on Funchal. So let's get started. Hello again, everyone. I'm now in downtown Funchal, and on this stop we are only here for part of the day until about 4:30 p.m. or so I really didn't have a whole lot of time. But anyhow, we are right on the coast, and that would be the Norwegian Getaway parked at the dock. And though I really didn't have a whole lot of time, I did find some pretty interesting places, and also some of the narrowest streets that I've ever seen, and those will be coming up later. And this is kind of right next to the Old Town Business District, where they have a lot of shopping and restaurants. And then this area right in here is kind of this large courtyard area, and it looks like it could also double as maybe a concert stage or a theater area. And just some interesting background on the city. Funchal was founded in 1424 as a Portuguese colony, and the city was named after the fennel plant, which is found in abundance on the island. And the island itself is approximately 30 miles long and about 10 miles wide, and is located about 600 miles from the mainland of Portugal. So it is pretty far out here by itself. And Funchal is the largest city on the island, and it's home to about 105,000 people, while the entire island has about 250,000 or a quarter million. And just crossing the street here, also the island has a very mild Mediterranean climate with pretty steady year-round temperatures, and in the summertime it's in the 60s and 70s. And it doesn't really even cool down that much even in the winter time. And anyhow, just walking up to this ice cream and gelato store here, and they got all these different flavors, and the sign says one scoop is $2, or €2 I mean, which is about $2.40. And then this building coming up here on the right with the two police officers standing outside, that is the state legislative building. And I'm not really sure what the laws are here regarding filming in public. I know some countries can be pretty strict, so I really didn't want to stay in front of this building for too long. But it seems like most people here really weren't bothered by my camera. And then this other building on the left, that would be the Barcelo Funchal Old Town Hotel, and that is listed as a 5-star hotel, and the price for tonight is about $243, which might be a good deal for a 5-star hotel, but it is a bit more pricey. And here's this restaurant here, and it's called the Restaurant Central Commercial, and there you can get a veal chop with risotto for €26, or a grilled grouper with potatoes and vegetables for €21. And they have another restaurant here on the right as well. And though it's a little bit crowded around the menu, I was able to see that a personal goat cheese pizza is about €16. And they also had crepes there with various fillings such as ice cream or banana for about €8. And this other building on the right, this is a pretty interesting looking building, and this is the Funchal Cathedral, which is also known as the Cathedral of Our Lady of Assumption. And this is a Catholic church which was built in 1514, though construction started in 1493. So it actually took over 2 decades to build. And that would make this church over 500 years old, which is actually rather remarkable considering what good condition the building is in. And also keep in mind that this was built long before modern machinery or technology, so everything, of course, was all done by hand. And the church actually looks even bigger from the inside than it does from the outside, with these very nice high vaulted ceilings. And even today, many modern buildings are not built like this just because of the extra cost. And it also has nice stained glass windows and the nicely polished wooden benches. And it just makes me think what it must have been like attending Sunday church service here over 500 years ago, and how much different life was back then, how much more isolated the island was before the internet and telephone, and what a small little community they must have had here. And though I don't know how friendly people of the city were back then, I do know that Funchal was the subject of several pirate raids and invasions during the 16th and 17th centuries, and they actually had a rather large attack in September of 1566 when 1,200 Frenchmen on 3 ships attacked Funchal and several of the neighboring islands. And it said that even though the citizens of Funchal had prior warning that an invasion of neighboring islands was occurring. And here's just a little cafe that I'm walking up to, and they kind of have an interesting menu. You can get a grilled sandwich with garlic butter, cheese, and bacon for €3, or an egg and cream custard pie, which it basically looks like a pie with a egg and cream filling, for about €2.5, which is about $3. And then here's this other restaurant. It's looks like a espresso bar here, and they have a espresso or coffee is €1.8. And anyhow, getting back to my story, so even though the citizens of Funchal, they knew that the French were in the area and that they too were probably going to be invaded, they still were not able to repel an invasion force of 800 French in September of 1566. And it said that the French encountered little resistance on the island, and that they occupied and looted Funchal for 15 days. And then this building here on the right would be the Santander Bank, and they're actually based out of Boston, Massachusetts, and they got branches all over the place. And then this is the Black Pearl Restaurant, and the specials for today are a Black Pearl Prego sandwich with fries for €6.8. And I believe a Prego sandwich is basically just a beef sandwich with some extras such as cheese, onions, tomatoes, and various garlics. And also the beef slices are very thinly cut. And you can also get a more traditional club sandwich there for about €6. And also notice that this building that I'm walking next to right now has got some pretty heavy duty window coverings. Not sure if that's because maybe at one time it was kind of a high crime area, or if it still is. It seems like it is a pretty safe area. And just getting back to the story about the French raid in 1566. Sorry that it's coming in so many different parts, but just trying to balance everything out. But it really wasn't clear from the record whether the French government, if they were ever held responsible, or even if there was anything that the Portuguese could have done at the time. And It said in the following year of 1567, the Portuguese sent out a special group of government officials to the island to plan the building of more forts to protect the city from future invasions. And there would be smaller raids in the following years by pirates, and some of which resulted in kidnappings of Portuguese citizens. And interrupting one more time, this would be another church building, and that would be the Church of St. John the Evangelist. And then this building that's directly ahead would be the Funchal City Hall building. And I also believe that the Catholic Church back there, that building is also shared with the College of Funchal. So they have a college inside of the building as well as a church. And now just crossing the street, and this building that's coming up, it does look a little bit more modern than those other buildings. And this would be the criminal court building, and it's pretty much where you don't want to wind up on your vacation. But luckily, Funchal, like most cities in Portugal, appears to be relatively safe. And just some background information about the crime in Portugal. Overall, the incarceration rate in the entire country of Portugal is about 1/4 that of the US, with only about 120 people per 100,000 are currently in jail or in prison in Portugal versus over 500 people per 100,000 in the US. So the incarceration rate in the US is about 4 times as high as it is in Portugal. And no one really knows why the US has such a high incarceration rate. And to just put that into perspective, the United States has about 1.6 million people who are currently in jail or in prison, while Portugal only has about 12,000 people in prison for the entire country. So that's a huge difference. And but you also have to keep in mind that Portugal is a much smaller country with a population of about 12 million people versus over 300 million people in the United States. And just getting back to the tour here, this is a rather large wash area that they have, and it probably has to be this big just to handle all the runoff from the mountains when it rains, so they don't have any flooding. And just crossing the street, and I do see there's a Coldwell Banker here, and I'm just going to check out some of the properties for sale, and these are rather expensive. On this side they have homes over 1 million euros, and then over here on this other side they do have some cheaper condos for about 90,000 euros and up, which is about a little over $100,000. But the average price of a home in Funchal is about 400,000 euros, which would be about $500,000, and that's still quite a bit of money when you consider that the average pay in Funchal is rather low, or just in Portugal itself, the average pay in Portugal is about 1,700 euros per month. And this next business is a gelato shop. And here they have all the different flavors, and one scoop of gelato is 2.1 euros. And then just outside here they have all the taxis lined up. And surprisingly, they do not have Uber here any longer. Uber was here, but they lost their license to operate, and all the licensing stuff for taxis and ride shares, that's controlled by the government. And here's a farmer's market, and those cherries that were there are 6 euros per kilogram, so that would be about $3 per pound. And anyhow, just getting back to the cost of living out here and the average wages. So if the average person makes about 1,700 euros per month, that would suggest that, much like the United States, there is a large wealth gap here. And then I'm just coming up to another restaurant, and this is a sandwich shop, and they sell various kinds of Prego sandwiches with extras such as bacon, cheese, and egg for about €3 each. And this is another gelato shop, and they have some interesting flavors such as Carmela and Oreo for €4 per cone. And they also sold cream pies there for €1.5. And then the next restaurant coming up is a sandwich and custard shop. So besides sandwiches, they sell these custards, which are basically like a baked pastry with egg or some other filling such as bacon or cheese inside. And the custards are €1.5 each. And just getting back to what I was talking about earlier about the high cost of living here and the relatively low pay, and how it appears that there is a wealth gap here as there is in the United States. Though that may be true, it does seem like they're handling the situation a lot better here just because there's so many fewer homeless people here than in the United States. And that could be because of a number of reasons. One, of course, is the population of Portugal is much smaller, but even when you do take that into account, I think overall they just have better social programs here, and that could be too because they are helped quite a bit by basically tourism. Each year about 20 million people visit Portugal, and that makes up for about 18% of their GDP, which is quite a bit. So they get the boost from tourism and all the associated taxes from that, and that helps them basically balance their budget and pay for generous social programs. And then just getting back to the tour, here's another custard shop, and they sell custards for €1.5 each, or a box of half a dozen for €6. And again, a custard is a baked or fried pastry with something inside of it. Those had egg, and then they could also have other extras such as bacon or cheese inside of them as well. And just getting back to some of the social programs that they have here in Portugal that they do not have in the United States. One of them is called the Guaranteed Income Measure, and basically what that does is it guarantees every Portuguese citizen a basic level of income, and programs like that probably explain why there's far fewer homeless people here in Portugal than there are in the US, where you might get a situation where if someone loses their job and once their unemployment runs out, then it's possible that they could wind up homeless, whereas here in Portugal, that same person, they would be guaranteed a certain basic level of income. And programs like that would basically prevent a person from becoming homeless in the first place. And the only similar programs in the US to the guaranteed income maybe might be welfare, but of course most welfare programs in the US are very limited, and they're typically only for people with children. Anyhow, I'm just walking into this market called the Mercado dos Labradores, and that translates as farmers market. And they have all these fruit and vegetable stands set up here. And some of the prices, the grapes that I can see are about €4 per kilogram, which is about $2 per pound. And then they have some tomatoes that are €2 per kilogram, which is about $1 per pound. And the cheapest fruit that I could see back there were the bananas, which were about €1 per kilogram, which is about 50 cents per pound. And just in this next room here, they have a fish market, and I was actually able to smell it while I saw it. And they have these fish on ice, I believe red snapper and some sea bass. And then those other fish there were just kind of sitting out there, and hopefully They haven't been out there for too long, and just walking outside directly across the street, they have a bar, and I believe the other one's also a bar, so two bars across the street. And then as I'm walking along here, something kind of rather unusual happens just as I'm getting about to cross this street. This person in the shorts and the backpack here, he walks up to this guy and then he slaps him, and not really sure what's going on there. And then I hear people across the street. They were yelling something, and hopefully they were trying to help the other person, though I really couldn't tell because it was in a foreign language. And prior to this, I thought that Funchal was pretty safe, but I could be wrong about that. Anyhow, continuing on, here's another restaurant, and they have an interesting menu. You can get a grilled octopus with roasted potatoes for 18 euros, or a fried prawn with garlic for 7 euros. And prawns are basically similar to shrimp. And this next street here that I'm just walking, I just turned on. This is probably one of the narrowest streets that I've been on, and there are restaurants on both sides of the street, and there's not a whole lot of room for much of anything. Just kind of a narrow pathway to walk in between the tables. And they also have a couple of hotels and a hostel in this area as well. And this first restaurant, they have a plate of risotto with octopus for 16 euros. And then they have another restaurant here, and there's also a hotel off to the left, and that is the Apartments Santa Maria. And there at the apartments, you can get a one-bedroom apartment for tonight, and that costs about $150 per night on booking.com. And here are just some more restaurants, and again, it's also a very narrow street. And at this restaurant, you can get a steak skewer and fish platter for two for 29 euros, or a blackened scabbard fish with fried banana and passion fruit for 22 euros. And overall, the prices seem to be pretty reasonable here. They look to average about maybe $20 per person. And I actually haven't eaten at any of the restaurants here, but they do look good, though I don't really think you could find much better food than what we already have of the Norwegian getaway. And I had a pretty big breakfast this morning, and they pretty much had everything at the buffet. You can get fresh fruits and all kinds of breakfast items. They have yogurt parfaits, breakfast cereals, and the list goes on and on. They have pancakes, waffles, eggs, both hard-boiled and scrambled, sausage, bacon, more traditional breakfast. And they also have a omelet station where you could order your omelet just specially for you. And even that is just probably a partial list of all the food they have on the buffet. The ship is just really like a giant floating restaurant. And of course, the buffet is free for everyone. So I guess in some ways they do kind of spoil your appetite when we make stops like this. Though it shouldn't be too big of a deal because we're going to be in Lisbon pretty soon. And that's on the mainland of Portugal, and that's the capital of Portugal. And we'll be there in about 2 more days. So I'll still have plenty of time to try out the local foods. And for what I understand, when we make port stops like this, the cruise company will buy some of the local produce, like the last time they bought a lot of fruits and vegetables. And anyhow, just getting back to the tour, the building on the left, that would be the Santa Maria Hostel, and that is currently $63 per night. And overall, they seem to have a pretty good customer reviews online. Though the thing with hostels is besides the business itself, I guess a lot will depend on who you're sharing the room with. And though it's probably also possible that some hostels you can rent a private room, so I guess some do operate more as a hotel. But I've never stayed at a hostel before, and I actually might start looking into hostels just while I'm here, because the price of hotels is rather expensive here. I'd say right now they're around $150, $200 per night, so that they are kind of expensive. And there's another expensive hotel just coming up, and the building off to the left, that would be the Hotel Porto Santa Maria, and that is listed as a 4-star hotel, and that is currently $325 per night, which is one of the more expensive hotels here in the city. And it probably is so expensive because we are pretty much right on the beach here. They have this little park area, and then off over to the right, they also have the Funchal cable car lift, and it's kind of hard to see it with all those trees there, but they have this station just at the base here, that glass building. That would be where people catch the cable car, and that will take you all the way to the top of the mountain. And the cost to do that is 18 euros per person, and it's about a 15 to 20 minute cable car ride to the top of the 3,000-foot mountain that we are right next to. If you do want to take the cable car, you probably should be prepared for some crowds and to wait in line for about 10 to 15 minutes, because it is kind of busy. And you should also keep in mind that those cable cars pretty much work like a ski lift, where you could be sharing the same car with 2 to 3 other people. And there is the Norwegian Getaway parked at the dock off in the distance. And this is the beach coastal area right here. And it's kind of neat how they have this walkway. And this parallels right in front of the Hotel Porto Santa Maria. And then this pathway also leads to one of the forts, which was built following the devastating raids by the French in 1566. And I would also like to add a few more interesting points about the island that I might have missed so far. At one time, they were a large producer and exporter of sugarcane, which they were able to do with the assistance of slave labor. And in the 1600s, they switched from growing sugar to grapes because it was no longer economical for them to produce sugar, as a cheaper form of sugar was being grown out of South America, and probably on a much larger scale than they were able to do on this island. And I also believe that the sugar raised in South America was also grown with slave labor as well. And anyhow, they switched from sugar to grapes, and with grapes they also produced wine, which they still continue to do today. Though now I believe tourism is much bigger than either one of those industries has ever been. And also, some famous residents of Funchal were Christopher Columbus, who was one of the earlier residents of the city of Funchal in the 1400s. And of course, back then, this part of the Atlantic was new to everyone, even for the Portuguese. So Christopher Columbus did get an early start at exploring and discovering new frontiers, and he would later go on to discover the Americas in 1492. And much like most Portuguese are, Christopher Columbus was a Roman Catholic, and even today about 80% of Portuguese are Catholic, and another maybe 15% or so are non-religious, so that really doesn't leave a whole lot of room for other religions. There's maybe a small percentage of Protestants in Portugal, maybe 2-3%. And as far as Jewish or Muslim, there's maybe a very small handful. So it is a very Catholic state. And just getting back to the tour, I'm still walking up to the fort, and this area right in here looks to be parking for the Hotel Porto Santa Maria. And it's taking me a little bit longer than I thought it would to get to this area, and that could be because you kind of start climbing these hills in here, and they actually get pretty steep, especially right as you get to the fort right in here. And you also have to be pretty careful in this area because the streets also get really narrow. And then there's times when you kind of come up to these curves, and just have to keep in mind that you do share the streets with cars. And this would be the fort. It's called Fort Tiago, and this was one of several forts that was built following the devastating French raid of 1566. And I believe this was built the following year in 1567, or at least construction was started, and it looks like they're doing some more construction on the building, and they do have most of it closed off, but they had these really neat classic cars just parked here in front, and I believe those are part of the museum that they have here. And I don't really know what kind of cars these are, so if you happen to know, just let me know in the comments below. And I don't think that Portugal has its own auto industry. There might be foreign companies that do produce cars in Portugal, but I don't believe that there is a Portuguese car like how Germany has their own auto industry, or the US has its own auto industry. I could be wrong about that. And anyway, I'm just going to walk up to this neighborhood just right up above here, and it's a pretty interesting area, though it's rather a steep climb just going up this hill, and there's just some neat old houses up here, and they also have a couple restaurants and cafes, and it's a really good viewing area of the beach down below. And of course, like much of the island, the parking situation here is kind of difficult, and in general, I don't really think I'd want to be driving around streets like this. And even if you're just parking your car here, I would be kind of worried about my car because there's really not a whole lot of room, and it seems like your car could get dented and scratched up pretty easily here. But I guess if you live on this island in this part of the city, you probably don't have much of a choice, either drive or walk. And of course, back when these houses were built hundreds of years ago, they really didn't have the concept of garages, even if there was room, which on this street there certainly isn't. And this house here looks even older than a few hundred years old, and some of them kind of are in poor condition. And if I had more time, it would even be interesting to go inside of one of these older buildings just to see what it's like. And I'm sure there's some that are quite fixed up inside, but there's others that it doesn't look like anyone's living in them, so it's kind of a hit and miss. And just a few other interesting facts about Portugal that I would like to add. Since 2002, the use of drugs, including hard drugs, has been decriminalized. Even drugs such as cocaine or heroin have been decriminalized. And though it's still illegal to sell such drugs, it is not a punishable offense to have less than 10 days worth of supply of any hard drug, and that is certainly much different than most other countries. And this building right here, this would be another Catholic church, and then we're at the top of this hill right here, and they have this really good viewing area. People are just sitting here on this ledge, which is actually kind of crazy because it's a really long way down. I'd say we're about 50-60 feet up here, and you got a good view of the bay, and there might be the getaway in the background. And we are now leaving Funchal and off to our final destination, which is Lisbon, Portugal.